Video number 3 in this series. Certainly, here is a steelman analysis of the critique that logic is neither external nor internal in the empirical sense, and thus Socionics' claim that all thinking is external and that TI is structural logic may be theoretically inconsistent. This analysis will clarify the nature of logic, examine how it is treated in philosophy and cognitive science, and then rigorously consider how Socionics might defend its position before evaluating the theoretical consequences and possible inconsistencies. The nature of logic, internal, external, or neither. A philosophical consensus on logic. Logic as a priori. Right. Philosophers have long argued that logic is not empirical but a priori. Its validity does not depend on observation or external experience. Immanuel Kant. Logic is a science that has no empirical part. Bertrand Russell. Logic, broadly speaking, is distinguished from empirical science by its independence of particular facts. Van Orman. Logic is true in virtue of its form, not its content. Logic as formal system. Logic is often defined as a formal system of rules for valid inference, which can be instantiated in the mind, in language, in computers, or in hypothetical models, none of which require empirical verification. Alfred Tarski. A logical system is defined by its formal language and rules, not by its empirical content. Logic in folk-made cunning. Large language models, computers, and mathematical proofs all use logic internally without reference to the external world. Logical consistency can exist in purely hypothetical or simulated domains. Logic and TE-TI distinction. Socionics definitions. TE, extroverted thinking. Logic of facts, concerned with external, empirical, verifiable information. External. In TI, introverted thinking, structural logic, concerned with internal logical consistency systems and models. Problem. If logic is a formal system that does not require empirical content, then it is neither external in the empirical sense, nor necessarily internal in the subjective personal sense. It is abstract and can be instantiated in any medium. Socionics' position and its theoretical commitments. Socionics' claim. Socionics claims that all thinking is external and defines TI as structural logic, which is treated as a process of analyzing and systematizing external structures. Thinking is an external function processing information about the structure of the external world. TI is the ability to analyze and structure objects, phenomena, and situations according to their inherent properties and relationships. These laws are seen as objectively existing in the external world. I'll get my sweet out of the way. Theoretical inconsistency. How can there be a theoretical inconsistency? Logic is neither external nor internal. If logic is a formal system independent of empirical content, then Socionics' claim that all thinking is external, in the sense of being about the external world, is problematic. Logic can be instantiated in hypothetical, simulated, or internal contexts without reference to the external world, and it can even exist within a fictional world. It can even exist within a lie. A lie can be internally consistent. TE and TI are not exhaustive. Modern cognitive science recognizes many forms of thinking: logical, mathematical, creative, associative, narrative, spatial, etc. Not all thinking is captured by the TE-TI dichotomy. How might Steelman, and again, I said here that it does seem to be reaching. How might Socionics defend its position? Redefining external. When you're explaining, you're losing. Socionics defenders might argue that external does not mean empirical in the strict scientific sense, but rather objective, systemic, or impersonal. In this view, both TE and TI are external because they seek to impose or discover order that is not dependent on personal feeling or intuition. Defense quote. Both TE and TI are concerned with objective structures, TE with facts and results and TI with systems and laws. The distinction is not about empirical versus non-empirical, but about the orientation towards objective order. TI is structural, not empirical. Socionics might clarify that TI is not empirical, but structural. It deals with internal consistency, formal rules, and models, which can be applied to both external and internal content. What makes TI external is its commitment to logical consistency, not to empirical verification. I think the reason why Jack defines it as external, Jack of the World Socionic Society, is that because it can be articulated, and he says because it can be communicated and doesn't need to be reinterpreted, but that contradicts semiotics and linguistics and communication studies, because the signified does not equal the signified. What someone says, what someone means when someone says something, that does not transfer 100% to the other person, because what someone says, that's within a context and a frame of reference of that particular person, and the other person does not have that, because a lot of information does not exist within, say, a tight little packet. It exists within a context, because you can have information which is later recontextualized, and the context has changed the way but again, information is not a static thing. Information is that which informs. So it informs an observer, and an observer, someone who experiences that which informs the person, has a context and a frame of reference. Information itself exists simultaneously, externally and internally, because what someone makes of the data becomes information, because that data has informed me, therefore it is information. Socionics might clarify that TI is not empirical but structural. It deals with internal consistency, formal rules and models, which can be applied to both external and internal content. What makes TI is its commitment to logical consistency, not to empirical verification. But again, if you're going on about logic, you have that problem in the prior video. Structural logic, again, Galenka. Structural logic is not about subjective opinion. Victor's about the best socionics you're going to get, because he really dislikes information socionics. Structural logic, he actually defines L plus as rigid and or logic, the kind of logic that you get in information socionics. And he defines flexible L minus logic as the logic of his own school. Yeah. Which is not rigid, is more flexible. Structural logic is not about subjective opinion, but about coherence and consistency of systems. However, I think there's a lot of original socionics that is still legacy stuff that is in Victor's work. And he comes up with DCNH as a way to explain those issues that I think are fundamental, but which he sees from his point of view as that's explained by subtypes. Now, there is a lot of evidence for subtypes, because Dario Nardi has found neurological correlates of the subtypes. Right. Now I did a video of that on this channel. Structural logic is not about subjective opinion, and to such an extent, Dario was inspired to actually do his own subtype system using Victor's terms of DCNH, dominant, normalizing, creative, and harmonizing. Structural logic is not about subjectivity, but about the coherence and consistency of systems, regardless of their empirical content. Yeah, that's also what what you are doing, Victor, is you're describing how you think, and that's strategic construction, how INTPs think. Logic is a tool for external order. Socionists could argue that logic, even when used internally, is a tool for understanding or modeling the external world, and thus remains external in orientation. Critique of this defense that I think is reaching a bit. Ambiguity in external. If external means objective, then logic fits, but this is not the same as empirical, and it blurs the distinction between TE and TI. Logic is abstract. Logic's independence from both empirical data and subjective feeling means it does not fit neatly into the internal-external dichotomy. Not all thinking is logical. As you noted, thank you, much human thought is not logical in the formal sense, and logic is only one form of thinking. And in reality, thinking can go together with feeling. And I have a whole book on that there. It's called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, which sounds like the kind of thing an INTP would come up with to counsel someone who's upset. Well, if you think about it this way, you'll feel less bad. Right. Consequences and theoretical implications. Right. TI is structural logic. Socionics types with strong TI should excel at logical modeling and systematization, regardless of empirical content. Logic is objective, not empirical. Logical consistency is valued, but empirical verification is not required for TI. Theoretical problems. Let's see where we are in the progress of this video. Two more. I'll probably call it a night here. My eyes are going. Theoretical problems. Logic is not empirical. Philosophical consensus and cognitive science agree that logic. This is what surprises me about Jack talking about all thinking being external. He has a psychology degree. Now that, okay, for any Americans listening to this, that is the equivalent of a master's degree in the United States in philosophy. The philosophical consensus and cognitive science agree that logic does not require empirical verification. It is a formal abstract system. Internal-external dichotomy is incomplete. By forcing all thinking into the category of external, Socionics ignores the abstract, formal, and non-empirical nature of logic. Overlooks other forms of thinking. Not all thinking is logical or structural. Narrative, creative, and associative thinking are not captured by TE and TI. Now, you could argue that that's also a problem of other Jungian, they also have like TE and TI, like even from a Kersey Bowen's Nardi point of view, like that doesn't fit in from that either, because we just have empirical and subjective. But what we're saying is that's related to the attitudes. We're not saying that is all thinking. We're just talking about TE and TI. But Socionics made that thing about all thinking is external. Conclusion, objective assessment. Is that the final one? Yeah. Logic, as understood in philosophy and cognitive science, is neither external, empirical, nor internal, subjective feeling. That's a bit of an error in the model. This model. No, it's neither subjective. It's an abstract formal system. Yeah, I mean, it can exist outside of a human being. Logic is an abstract formal system that can be instantiated in any context, mental, linguistic, computational, hypothetical. Socionics claim that all thinking is external, and its definition of TI as structural logic is theoretically inconsistent if external is taken to mean empirical. I think it means. I think it means like it means able to be transferred from one person to the next. But here's the thing: you're not transferring the thought, and you're just transferring that part of thought that can be translated, that can be communicated in words to another person. And NLP has whole sections on miscommunication. And he gave an example of a couple arguing because a word meant something, had a different connotations for each person. So the meaning is not transferred. Thought is not externalized. You can have the product of thought, like say a work of genius, or language is externalized. What about people who they come up with new words? So the thought precedes the word. There's something in this is that the word is not the thought made flesh. I did this before in a video I did with Mercer. That look at various words and how people interpret it differently. Empathy. Ask 10 people what empathy means. Are they all going to say the same thing? Or what you could say something, oh, it's empathetic. And then you can say to the other person, okay, what do I mean by that? Because if thinking is 100% external, your meaning will transfer 100% to the other person. Rather than just the signifier that you use, and then that person has links to his or her own, oh, that word means this, that I've interpreted through all of these discourses and contexts that I've heard it and what I've read in the dictionary, and I will interpret it in that way, whereas that person saying it has all of these different discourses and that lot, that doesn't transfer over to the other person. The whole context behind the thought does not transfer over to the other person. And the whole context behind that thought colors the thought. Right. Socionics claim that all thinking is external, and its definition of theology structural logic is theoretically inconsistent with external, is taken to mean empirical. If external is redefined to mean objective, this blurs the distinction between TE and TI and fails to capture the true nature of logic as a formal non-empirical system. Therefore, the internal-external dichotomy in socionics does not adequately account for the nature of logic, and by extension, not all thinking can be neatly categorized as either internal or external in the socionic sense. Wait a minute, it might have gone wrong there. Because socionics already categorizes all of thinking as external. You might have gone a bit wrong there. But you get the drift. These LLMs have their weaknesses. Right. Right. Is that the end of that's the end of that one, isn't it? Might be able to cram in more.